Hey coaches, this is Brody coming to you heading into week 3 of practices, huddles, and games. And I hope that you're seeing some progress in your teams and also in your huddle time. I know when I was coaching, one of the best things about coaching would be to watch from the beginning of the season and then watch as you got into the season, as the dribbling and the basic skills became more refined, as the chemistry of the team was coming together, and as the shots started to go in and the points started to pile up. It was always encouraging to see where we started and where we had come to, and yet know that there was still a lot of work to go. And I hope that you're enjoying that process, and I hope that your kids are really grabbing on to your investment and enjoying the game as we played it upward. I want to take us back into the mid-practice huddle. We're still talking about the issue of courage. And looking at Joshua chapter 1, verse 9, it says, "Be strong and brave. Do not be terrified. Do not lose hope. I am the Lord your God. I will be with you everywhere that you go." And we've talked about why God was even talking to Joshua. Joshua had succeeded in transitioning leadership from Moses, and now he was standing in front of Jericho. And God's saying, hey, here's some things I think that you might be feeling, and I want to tell you, you don't need to be there because I am with you, so be strong and be brave. And you know, our kids live in a world where sometimes they are terrified, just like Joshua might have been. God kind of named that here. He said, don't be terrified. And Joshua was probably terrified. And our kids live in a world where they may be terrified many times. Some are terrified of losing friends if they don't act a certain way. Some are terrified of making bad grades and what the response to that might be from parents or teachers. Some are afraid and terrified of not being perfect. Some are terrified of the dark. Some are terrified of the unknown. Some are just scared of life in general and things that might be going on either at home or in the other places that they go. And into this, God steps in. He says, you know, just like Joshua did not need to be terrified, you don't need to be terrified. Be courageous. Why? Because I'm with you. Now, sometimes we have a hard time figuring out, well, how does that actually work? And does it always work? Does God show up? And I think another story you could bring into your huddle is the story of Daniel in the lion's den. Daniel had been doing the things that God had asked him to do all along. And he was in a rotten situation. He was far, far from his home. He was in a nation that he didn't agree with the religious beliefs or even the way that the leaders acted many times. And yet he continued to do right. And yet here all of a sudden he's standing at the edge of the lion's den, a big pit, almost like a cave that would go down, that they would leave lions in there and make them hungry. And I can imagine Daniel standing on the edge going, really, God? I'm terrified. Are you actually going to show up? I've been trying to do what you've asked me to do. And if Daniel's anything like us, he would have been terrified. And I can imagine as they pushed him in, and he was like, this is the end. God didn't show up. And yet God did. Because Daniel hit the bottom of that, and he stood up, and the lions' mouths were sealed. Because God showed up. Now, do angels show up in that way every day in our kids' lives and in your players' lives? Maybe not as obvious, but God still shows up. He changes somebody's heart. He changes somebody's attitude. He gives us a word of encouragement, and he shows up. So we don't need to be terrified because we serve a God who is much bigger than anything that can happen in our homes, in our schools, in our grades, in our minds. He's bigger than that. And so he showed it in Daniel. He showed it with Joshua, and he continues to show it to us. It may be a great opportunity for you to share with your team a story of when God was bigger than something in your life and where you were a little bit nervous or you're a little bit scared, but God showed up and things changed. We're asking these kids to have courage. They get to have courage to try new things in basketball. They need to have courage because they have a God who is bigger than anything they can face in life. It's a great opportunity for you to share just how big our God is and just how important he is in everyday life. I hope you have a great time sharing this. Don't forget, story is something that's really important. Setting ground rules is something that's really important. Reviewing what you've already talked about, leading into what you're talking about today, is also very important. I hope you have a great huddle. I hope you have a great practice. Can't wait to see you on the court on Saturday. Thanks.